What's up, everybody? We've got a verdict in Delphi. We will see. Is Richard Allen guilty? Is he not guilty? What does the jury say? What does it mean? What's he looking at sentence-wise? We're going to talk about all that. We're going to answer your questions. Let's get to it. So whenever we're waiting for a verdict, it always brings me back to the feeling you get as a lawyer, standing next to your client with their life literally on the line, and you just sit there and you wait. And you don't know, especially in this case, when they've been deliberating for 20 hours. I think you feel pretty good about the job that you did. You know, you presented the case, you made the jury think, you made the jury go back there and say, well, I get it that the cops arrested him. I get it that the prosecutors think that he did it and they're pointing the finger at him. And a lot of the witnesses are pointing the finger at him, kind of in this case, a little bit different, but law enforcement definitely thinks he did it. The prosecutors definitely think he did it. Sometimes that alone is enough for the jury to just vote guilty. And that happens sometimes in our system. It sucks. It's not how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But in this case, I think the defense lawyers can sit there and they can know we put on a fight. We explained the issues in the state's case. We put forth the holes that we saw, the reasons we think it was not our client. And the jury thought about it. And regardless of what the verdict is, the defense put up a fight. I am sure, as every defense attorney does, they're back there and they're wondering, did we do the right thing? Did we put on enough evidence? Did we, pick at the holes that were big enough and the holes that were in the jury's mind? And in a case like this, where the defense got to hear the questions from the jurors, you kind of get an understanding. In Florida, we have this, right? In civil cases, jurors are allowed to ask questions. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But when they do, all eyes are on them. All ears are on them. And you really can learn what questions the jurors have. And Bob mentioned this morning, if you hadn't had a chance to check out the podcast this morning, whatever the verdict is, you should watch it. It's really interesting because we really talked about it from both perspectives on, I really pressed into him on, you could see how a juror would vote guilty on this. And he said yes, without much pushback, right? So I know that Bob has been somebody that's really been shining a light on this case. He's found a lot of issues in this case, and he said he leaned that he's factually innocent. But he said he gets it. 60 plus confessions. He's there at the time. He admits to being there at the time. There are issues. And so anybody, even a defense lawyer, right? We can feel horrible for our clients, right? We can feel horrible for the conditions that they're in prison, which I think his lawyers definitely feel that way in this case for Richard Allen. I'll tell you that right now. I guarantee they feel horribly for him. But at the end of the day, if the jurors hear his voice saying, I did it, if the jurors hear that, and that is enough to convict him, there was really never anything the lawyers are going to be able to do, right? Think about that. They can put on the case. They can say the conditions were horrible. They can say there's reasonable doubt. They could say the eyewitnesses weren't great. There's not enough time. There was probably two people. There's no weapon. They can say all that stuff, right? All right. The verdict is in. People are saying, I thought it was going to be 3:00. All right. I don't think the verdict's actually in. I'm going to keep updating my Twitter. I'm sure that we are going to have lots of people posting in the chat saying that the verdict is in, even when it's not, which is expected when you get a lot of people together. So I get it. I'm going to keep updating my Twitter. I will let you know when I see it confirmed that we have the verdict. Up until just a couple minutes ago, people were saying we're still waiting for the verdict. Verdict is in. Okay, people are saying that they're seeing. Okay, it's in already. Guilty. Everybody is saying guilty. Okay, I have not seen it. People are saying Defense Diaries posted it, so let's go check that out. Confirm here. All right, 1 minute ago, Richard Allen has been found guilty on all counts. I'm going to put it up here so we can take a look at it so that people can see it. For those that may come in late or join late, you can see verdict reached in Richard Allen's case, guilty on all counts. So again, you guys know kind of where I lean throughout the case, right? Definitely didn't think there was enough evidence. And I think the way that he was treated in the prison system is unlike anything that should ever happen to anybody. But throughout the entire trial, I really didn't want to lose track of what it's like to be a juror. And you are sitting back there, you're hearing about the case for the very first time ever. And you hear that the guy confessed to it. Okay. And again, I see people angry in the chat. I get it. I get that people are angry, that are upset, that believe this is an injustice. And I'm a big fan of justice. But I think we have to realize when we think about this jury, right? Even Bob said it. If you want to go back, listen to the podcast. We talked about this a lot. If you confess to something, it is really, really difficult to overcome. That's why we were talking about percentages of, cases we have confessions on as lawyers. It's a small percentage. But then when they take back the confession or say, oh no, it was a false confession, then that percentage goes down even more. And then to prove that to a jury, that a confession is false, almost never happens. And this case will be another mark in that column. That when you have a confession, and I'm just talking 1 or 2 confessions, not 60 confessions, but when you have a confession, it is incredibly hard to overcome. No matter how good the lawyer is, no matter how bad the evidence is against you, right? Some cases, it's only a confession, right? That's the best evidence you can have. Somebody's own words admitting to committing a crime. And in this case, I absolutely believe that that's what carried the day for this jury. And I can't be mad at the jury, right? I'm mad at the system. I'm frustrated at some of the pretrial calls by the judge. I'm mad at the prison system. You don't treat anybody like that, in my opinion. I'm really mad at how the pretrial system treated Richard Allen. I can't be mad at this jury. I really can't. They're hearing from experts, and the judge is allowing people to testify as an expert, and they hear this bullet matched. I did an experiment. Don't worry about what the pictures say. The bullet matched. I'm an expert. And then they hear him confess. And then they read him confess. And then they hear people explain how he confessed. We just have to understand that a set of normal people can go back there, discuss it, and say, let's believe him. Let's believe Richard Allen and what he said. And it's really tough for all of the issues that are surrounding it. From what I've read, he's looking at 130 years. I haven't seen anything that said life without parole. I don't think he's looking at the death penalty. In Indiana, there is a parole system. And even if you get, something like 130 years, even if you're guilty on a crime such as this, you can still be looking at parole. At some cases, it's like they wait 20 years, then you can get parole. Effectively, it's probably going to be for his life in prison if the conviction stands and the sentence stands. Will this case change anything locally? Will YSL? Those are great questions. I'm hoping that this case will change the way judges act potentially. And same thing with YSL. I hope they'll watch and see how you treat people and decisions you make and how important it is and that people are watching and it does matter. Now, I don't know. Some people could say that the end result, maybe the judge is going to think this is the end that they wanted. I don't know. The end they expected, the end that they thought was true. Truth and trauma. Thanks for having Bob on. Everyone should hear him praying for not guilty, for justice for Rick and the girls. Well, I do think that if it was a not guilty verdict, it's tough to find justice for Abby and Libby. It's tough to find justice for the victims because I really highly doubt that. I just realized there's just get rid of that F-bomb. I really highly doubt that they would ever investigate somebody else. I really highly doubt they'd ever be able to convict somebody else. If I was defending somebody else, let's say John Smith, let's say Elvis, the Elvis guy, if they were going to come at him and prosecute him and I was defending him, it's so easy to say the state's expert said Richard Allen's bullet was there. The state thought Richard Allen did it. Richard Allen confessed to the state. Richard Allen himself said he was there. It's very difficult to prosecute somebody else now that they presented a case like this against Richard Allen. The crowd yelled guilty on all counts. Verdict is in from the scene, guilty on all counts. I'm in shock. I feel horrible for this guy. So, again, I don't know what happened that day. I don't know if he did it or not. Legally, he's convicted of this crime. And so there is at least, a monicum of justice for the victims. And my guess is, I don't know this to be true, that the victims believe he did it, that the prosecution believes he did it, the law enforcement believe he did it. And while there are so many issues in this case with the process, looking at looking at reasonable doubt, from my perspective, it's plausible that a jury, based on the evidence that was presented to them from all of the reporting, even from a bunch of the reporting that said this case has so many holes, so many issues, if I'm just looking at their reporting and I hear how they reported the confessions and how the defense tried to combat the confessions and how they, and myself included, I hate that explanation of how the bullet is confirmed to be from Richard Allen's gun. I hate the way that's explained. I think that's not appropriate. It doesn't clear the bar of expert testimony, but that all happened before. The jury just heard it as fact, basically. Being from Indiana, this isn't justice for Abby and Libby. I don't know. I'm waiting to, hear what they have to say and what their family members have to say, and we'll see if the jury speaks. How likely is an appeal to reverse this on so many bad calls by the judge? An appeal is, 100%. 100% that this is going to be appealed. Now, the success, usually less than 10%. I think this case has a lot of issues. But there's so much judicial discretion involved in these types of calls and these kinds of issues that it's very hard to overturn these verdicts. Like Odinism, I'm not sure that's going to be something that's going to overturn the verdict. Letting the expert testify, I'm not sure that's going to be something that's going to overturn this verdict. There's going to be a slew of appellate arguments, right? They're going to be able to argue she abused her discretion. She allowed the expert testimony of the bullet. She allowed false confessions in, potentially, even though, she shouldn't have because of X, Y, or Z. They can make those arguments. Not allowing the third-party culprit, not allowing them to point the finger at somebody they believe also, confessed to spitting on the victims, not allowing them Odinism, motive, kicking the lawyers off in the middle of the case, creating issues between the client and the lawyer. There's going to be all sorts of issues. And they're definitely going to appeal it. They've got a lot of issues for an appeal, but appeals, kind of like false confessions, are very difficult to win on. I'm not angry. I'm disheartened. Graduated law school in May, and I don't think the system works right now. Also special ed teacher, so I know how likely a false confession is. So Lauren, I think all we can really do as lawyers and members of the public is fight and push for transparency and fairness. And fairness looks like treating somebody like a human being and appropriately up to trial, so we don't have these questions and we don't have the pit in our stomach that we may feel now about issues with this verdict. Will the judge be the same when it's appealed? Hope not. I believe this might go straight to the Indiana Supreme Court. Regardless, she'll handle a motion for new trial, Judge Gohl, but then as soon as it's appealed, no, it will not be her. My issue is not a single witness asked, do you see the person that you saw that day in the courtroom? Not a single one, SMH, and absolutely no DNA on him. I still feel confident, without a shadow of a doubt, which is a high standard for me as a lawyer, that this is a not guilty verdict without the confessions. So when you come to the eyewitnesses, the timeline, the bullet, all those other issues to me, while they're important, I'm sure the jury deliberated about them. I'm sure the jury considered them. I know the lawyers and witnesses focused on them. I really think at the end of the day, there were secondary issues. I could be wrong, right? I'm not a juror. I wasn't back there. That's the way I look at the case. Can the defense compel them to test thoughts, short hairs for like appeal? So not usually. I mean, they could make an argument that no reasonable juror could convict Richard Allen based on the evidence because they didn't gather evidence and make arguments like that. But with a confession, I really don't think that's going to be a winning argument. They have to stick to the four corners of what happened in the trial for the most part, unless it was something that was proffered. But lack of evidence or bad police investigation or bad police work, they made those arguments. So a lot of that was made to the jury. And so you're kind of limited on how you can argue that. There are grounds for appeal if RA makes it. He's absolutely going to appeal this case. Absolutely. What is your opinion about a successful appeal? Yeah, I mean, I talked about it. I think you're going to have to find where the judge abused her discretion, maybe bias against the defendant, bias against the defense lawyers. They have a lot of that happened pre-trial. I don't know. It didn't seem like, so I'll be honest, the people that were in the courtroom, it didn't seem like she was horrible to them in front of the jury. If she would have been, if they would have lost every objection, if they would have, if she would have berated them like we've seen judges do to lawyers in other trials, then I think that would be a better appellate argument. But it doesn't seem like that came out in front of the jury. Wonder how if they'll interview after learning all they don't know. That's a scary proposition too, right? So most jurors, after they're on a case that's high profile, they'll go do some research. They'll go watch. They'll go see what happens. And I'm a little nervous to see what their reaction is. K-Wags. It will be interesting to see if the jurors learn new things now that would have impacted their verdict, and if any speak out. I'm sad about this one. So that's when it becomes kind of weird, right? Because lawyers hypothesize all the time about Odinism or third-party culprit would have affected the jury's verdict. 99.9% of the time, we don't actually know. We don't actually get to ask the jurors. But in high-profile cases like this, it does present an opportunity for a juror to see something posted online and say that would have changed my verdict. Now, that usually would not be reason for appeal because the judge made the decision and the judge would have to abuse their discretion. But would it change the outcome? It's going to be a little bit like Pandora's box. Melistasi, I respect the jury's verdict because I wasn't in the courtroom every day listening and watching the evidence. I agree. And we know that they heard confessions over and over. When do you think the public can see the evidence? Not the gruesome pics, of course. I don't know. I don't know what that timeline is going to look like. Margarita, I'd love to know the juror's opinion when they learn everything the judge left out. Well, I got to be honest. I mean, judges keep things out in every case. They keep things out in every case. Sometimes jurors find out about it. Sometimes they don't. Christiana, was this one of the few that the chat, got wrong? Yes. I think this is the second maybe that the chat got wrong. From my perspective, I could see it, right? I could kind of see it coming, and there was a lot of uproar, and Defense Diaries and Andrea and a lot of these lawyers have really been shining the light on the process, on the problems about the process. I just know, right, as somebody who tries to convince jurors of things, right, and knows what jurors hold on to and what they find important. And I knew that, I couldn't so firmly get in the camp that I know what the jury is going to do in this case. Because you don't know how an individual person is going to break down and judge the credibility of confessions and the amount of confessions and the verbal and written confessions to all sorts of different people. I'm not angry with the jury. They went where the info they were given led them. I'm angry with the judge, prosecutor, and the people who actually did this. Yeah, I agree. And from my perspective, this is a feeling I've had sometimes after criminal trials where it's like, yeah, judge, when you keep all that stuff out or you let this crap in, like a lot of times it's the generally bad guy rule. When they let stuff in that just makes a criminal defendant look like a bad guy, right? Well, he was mean to his friend once, or he didn't pay a parking ticket. It's like, what does that have to do with whether or not he committed this crime? But no, the jury's going to look, he smokes 2 packs a day. It's like, what's that have to do with whether he's guilty or not guilty of this crime? But they let stuff like that in to try to color the minds of the jury sometimes. And I do get frustrated by it. But then what do you expect a jury to do? when they're given that information, they're going to make the best decision they can based on the information they're given. Yeah, Nurse KB, if we needed any more evidence of this, don't talk to the police ever, 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 ever. Ari also confessed to killing the grandkids. He doesn't have any grandkids. What about that confession? Listen, I agree. And that's one of the questions I asked Bob. Were any of them more lucid or more reasonable? I asked a bunch of the other guests that too, and they definitely seemed like some made more sense than others. Now who protects Richard Allen from torture? And now is where it really gets brutal, because a lot of people in society are like, okay, now he deserves all that. He deserves to be treated like that, which I would still disagree with. If they were to seek the death penalty and they get it, that's what he deserves. If they were to seek life without parole, 130 years in prison, whatever it is, that's what he deserves. But not to be treated and tortured and abused in prison. Nobody deserves that. People still have rights for that not to happen to them. I don't think Rick will survive until the appeal. I mean, yeah, hope is a dangerous thing, right? Did he get some hope? I can't imagine how his wife is feeling. It's brutal. I mean, one of two things: either thinking your innocent husband was convicted, or your husband actually did this. There's no good outcome in her mind and how she deals with this. And there's so many people that are affected by this outside just the core person of Richard Allen and the core victims. It's families and friends and everybody on the outside. I'm brokenhearted for Rick Allen and the families. No justice today. I mean, again, my guess is the victims believe justice was served today. We'll see. And I am going to be interested to hear any interviews that they do. Usually you have 30 days, then 30 days to appeal. It's to file your notice of appeal. I could never convict him with this evidence / trial. Again, I wasn't in there, so this one's a little tougher for me, but I know they heard confessions. And, we've had other cases on here. I'll just to kind of juxtaposition this. We've had other cases where the defendant's own words and what they said and either the confessions or the lies they told were like, boom, that got them. That's easy. They're going to be convicted by their own words. It's the best evidence against them, right? Well, same can be true, even if we know some other issues that give context to these confessions. Jurors' heads were down, people were saying. They don't take pleasure in this, right? It's not a surprise that jurors don't take pleasure in this. Nothing good is happening, right? Honestly, being from Indiana, the sheriff's department was probably completely inept in investigating this case. There's no way they handled anything properly. Yeah, that's what I heard from the jump, basically. They either didn't do stuff, or the stuff they did, they screwed up. They didn't follow up on leads. They didn't gather things. They didn't test things. That's horrible. I hate that, right? And without a confession, I would be appalled at a guilty verdict based on the evidence and the investigation in this case. I'll just tell you. That's how I would have felt. Feels empty. This is not the way justice is found. Too many red flags in the whole dang case. I haven't lived in Indiana for over 10 years. She's like, I'm out. I haven't been there, not me. I think the jury got it right from what they saw. Fairness includes full transparency in these cases. It's the defendant against more than the state. It's the corruption that needs to be in full view. Well, and I will say I'm talking so much about the confessions, right? The judge did allow them to make all sorts of arguments against the confessions, right? We got to hear cross-examination of the state's experts. We didn't get to hear it, but the jury did. They got to hear the defense expert explain how they're false confessions and how it all fits together. They were able to see and hear the prison conditions, the horrible, deplorable things that were happening to him, the timeline of when he broke and how he confessed, the interrogation where he denied everything emphatically. The jury was given all that context around the confessions. So I do think that their decision on the confessions was made with the full context. I haven't heard anybody inside the courtroom say otherwise. The verdict will be forever questioned, and time will not be kind. welcome to the new members. And thank you to Rebecca for gifting 10 memberships. Judge Gold does not decide the appeal. So, yeah, I was saying the torturous conditions of the prison and how he was put there, where he was put, how he was let out, the communication, the in-person meetings that he was or was not allowed to do, all while being presumed innocent awaiting trial. Most people sit in a county jail with other people that are there, well, for driving on a suspended license or a DUI or, just something much less severe than the people that are housed at the prison he waited for trial at. I feel that if he had not confessed, he might have gotten a not guilty verdict. That's how I feel. I worry the wrong person is behind bars and the evidence was poor, in my opinion. If the process was fair, I'd be okay with guilty, but this wasn't a fair process for Richard. Yeah, that's something that was kind of a common theme through all the videos I've done on this case is not going to feel great about this verdict, whether it's guilty or not guilty. Because if it's not guilty and a guy goes free after confessing to doing what he said he did to these two little girls, doesn't sit right with me. But somebody being convicted after going through what he went through pretrial and seeing what the investigation and evidence was, doesn't feel great either. Because I push it, I will see it here first. The Cowboys suck right now. Thanks for those who reached out. Yeah, so does Florida State. We lost 52-3. I can't even. Culper, forced to bet. Do you think there will be another trial? No. If I had to bet, I would say no. Not because I don't think there should be one or not because I think this one was great. I'm just an odds guy, right? If you're gonna give me even odds, I'm gonna take no on every appeal. I'm gonna take the bet that every appeal loses. I'll be wrong once or twice, but I'll be right the majority of the time. I'm sick to my stomach about this verdict, but funny story, sitting at the beach club pool at Disney and my Tampa neighbors don't know Peter and Whitney. They know now. It's awesome. What do you think his chances are for a new trial? I would say 10% at best. 10% at best. Aaron, at the FSU game, go Irish. I'm glad you called it the FSU game. Thank you for that, Aaron. Between judges, defense attorneys, and prosecutors, I don't think anyone wants truth. I would hate to ever agree with that. I see you. I understand why. I see you. But I can't ever get myself to agree with that. I will push and fight until I hope that's not the case and that the public doesn't think that's the case either. I hate that there are members of the public that would think that's the case. This case was mismanaged from the get-go. I agree with you there. I think it's just set harder when the victims are children. I agree with you 100%. It's harder. It's hard when there's any victim, right? Children victims makes it even more difficult, but there were just so many issues with this case that have given you an uneasy feeling and given me an uneasy feeling from the jump. Hoping he won't be mistreated, being that they no longer need his false confessions. It's a good way to look at it. But he is also now known as somebody who did this to children, and in prison, that doesn't usually go well for you. He was getting some of that before, just when he was accused. Well, now that he's been convicted, sorry, I'm not aware, but how was he treated in prison? I haven't followed this case at the beginning. Solitary confinement in a high maximum security prison, cut off communication for long periods of time with his wife, his, outside time. And again, this was all secondhand from what people reported from inside the courtroom. Okay. So I want to be clear with that. Even his outside time, there were still four walls and he could, look up at something. He was eating his feces and being followed 24/7 and cameras on him 24/7 and just all sorts of horrible conditions that people usually never have to deal with while they're awaiting trial. Gag order still in effect. Why? Suspicious. So I didn't hear that. I want to wait and hear that. That's interesting. To be clear, I hate it though. Way too many questions. Yeah, the questions are not great. Rebecca, the judge failed on this. Yeah, one of the worst things I saw is when the Indiana Supreme Court, they undid her ruling to boot the defense lawyers off the case. If you guys want to learn more about that, go check out my other videos on the Franks hearing where we dug into that. That was just absolutely horrible, stepping on a defendant's right to have a lawyer of his choice fight for him. And so when the Indiana Supreme Court reversed her ruling, they should have removed her from the case, in my opinion, and they didn't. I wish they would have. But I will say, okay, because I try to be fair, I try to give grace. From all accounts and all intents and purposes, from what I've heard, yes, the prosecution won more objections, things like that. That happens in most cases. She was not horrible to the defense attorneys from everything I heard and read and saw. Not horrible to them in trial. Jurors should be devastated when they find out everything that was withheld from them, especially the third-party culprits. So if I was going to ask you, what is the most important thing or the most damning thing that you think a juror is going to hear, read, or see afterwards that is going to give them pause or maybe give them a pit in their stomach? I hope they don't get that feeling. I hope they feel confident in it. I would hate for jurors to really stress about that. They go through enough. This is a civic duty. They're not paid for this. This isn't their job, things like that. So no DNA. I mean, they knew that, right? Having Indiana police has nothing to do with it. I'm in a small town in Illinois. My husband works for the sheriff's office. Thankfully, we have low crime, but we have a great team of smart, efficient lawyer officers. Yeah, I was not trying to insinuate that all officers are bad. The officers that investigated this case, I won't even say the officers as people or as a whole, but how they handled this case was horrible. How they handled this case was horrible. We'll be seeing a new season of Making Murder on Netflix soon. You know, there does seem to be some similarities between these two cases, right? There does seem to be some similarities between those two cases, I should say. Arrow you. More and more, it just seems like juries take beyond a reasonable doubt as a suggestion, not a rule. I mean, I think maybe people are just watching more now, right? Maybe there's just more eyes on it. Because if you ask defense lawyers for all of time, it's not an even playing field. Come in there, one guy or girl sits in that chair, and everybody on the other side, cops, prosecutors, everybody points the finger at them. So most jurors show up thinking that person did it and that person's guilty unless the defense can prove otherwise. I've even had friends, right, that I've talked about this stuff. And the friends that are sitting on jurors are like, we were just begging for the defense lawyers to give us a reason or give us something, some evidence. It's like they don't have to. But that's very common, and it's kind of always been that way. I can be your barometer of sort. There's enough data now to support whatever I think it's the opposite. One might presume at this point that they find their situation to be hopeless. Harry Harlow about monkeys in solitary for 12 months. Oh, interesting. Like a research from an article. Peter, can you practice in Indiana? RA needs someone like you. These lawyers, from all intents and purposes, I heard did a great job. And from my perspective, yes, we can handle cases in a lot of different states. I don't really do a lot of criminal defense anymore. 99% of what I do is wrongful death, personal injury cases, truck accidents, car accidents, things like that. And we do it all over the country for a lot of people that find us on here, which is, kind of wild to think about. But I think he's got the right guys to help him, and I hope they stay on. This is the second trial. I think the jury's got it wrong. I can't see what that is. Was the first. How often does this really happen, though? I'm concerned. I mean, it definitely happens. What the percentage is, I don't know. And I think anybody that does a survey like this would probably come up with different percentages. Rebecca, thank you for jumping on, Peter. Happy Veterans Day to all of our servicemen and women. God bless. God bless. Yes, thank you so much. So many members of my family. Pete Sardis was in the military. Witt's dad and brother, my grandfather, both my grandfathers. So many family members and people in the military, as I'm sure you guys are as well. So thank you and salute to your service. Thank you, Rebecca, for bringing this up and highlighting this. Most cops do their best, but they get overruled. Regardless of verdict, in my opinion, nothing will ever mean justice for Abby and Libby. Not really, not after what those little ones went through. I mean, yeah, there's nothing that makes it great or justifies it, right? In our criminal and civil justice system, it's limited in what we can do and what repercussions we can provide. But I get what you're saying. Jocelyn. Hi, Peter. I'm actually shocked with this verdict. And yes, the gag order is still in place. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. There was something else I wanted to say here. Yeah. So I wanted to mention, it was about 20 hours of deliberation. Bob and I were talking earlier about, the norm is kind of 1 hour per day which would have been around 17 hours. So it was a little bit longer than that. They took their time. 12 people got to a unanimous decision. I'm sure it wasn't easy. I would love to know what the holdups were and what the discussions were really about and how much they talked about before they started officially deliberating. That would be something really interesting to me. I would love to hear from the jurors in these cases. Please, if anybody finds anything from the jurors in these cases, tag me in it, send it to me. Hit the like button on this video, please, so it goes out there to as many people as possible so we can continue following this case and figuring out why it came down the way that it did. I'm very interested in it. I don't really feel like I'm surprised. Again, there have been a lot of cases that go a different way than I thought, right? The chat is almost always right. The chat does not always agree with me, right? Spoiler alert. I encourage disagreement, right? And diversity of thought. So from my perspective, that's a good thing, right? That we can talk about these things. And the chat got this one wrong, right? Now the chat was not able to watch the case. And I think that's underrated. We as a crew here were not able to watch the case. We got it secondhand. Even if we trust the people that gave it to us, it's still getting through somebody else's eyes and mouth. And I'm not saying they said anything wrong at all. What I'm saying is I can watch something and Deb can watch something and Marissa Monroe can watch something and Jennifer Levy can watch something and Cezalex can watch something and One Eye Horn Flying Purple People Eater can watch something and Ireland's Princess can watch something. And we can all see it differently, right? We can all see and hear something differently, especially when it's a criminal defendant's words. And that's why it's really hard when there are no cameras. Shannon, I think the jurors who look into the entirety of the case will feel misled once they find out the defense wasn't allowed to present the third-party evidence. So we say misled maybe because we disagree with it, but if the appellate court agrees with the judge's decision, then they weren't misled. But instead, that's the rules of evidence, only allowing in credible and reliable evidence. As much as I hate it, as much as I disagree with it, we have to make sure we're using, the proper terminology. And I mean, I hate it. There are some laws in Florida, especially, where I'm like, why the heck I feel like we're lying to juries. Like, we can't tell them there's insurance involved. We can't tell them who was actually doing X, Y, or Z. We can't tell them who's actually sitting at counsel table. It's like, why do we have to lie to them about this stuff? So it feels like it's misleading, but sometimes that's literally the law of the land. But your chat loves you. And I love them. A streamer was just saying, Laura, said never seen not guilty with confessions, true grizzly crime, baby. So I didn't say that's fine. I mean, to misquote a little bit is fine. I don't think, especially Gisela, she's not trying to misquote me or do anything like that. All I would say is very, very, very small percentage. You will almost never, except where I use it right here, you'll almost never hear me say the words always and never. I try to stay away from those words because there are so many outliers. I mean, my dad's been practicing for 50 years. I pick his brain about this stuff all the time. I've talked about it growing up as a kid. You guys have been able to hear me pick his brain and interrupt him and argue with him on these videos. And, we talk through stuff. We get heated. We go back and forth. We don't always agree or disagree. We don't always agree, I should say. But I really try to stay away from always and never. And I will say very, 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 very small percentage of the time. It's kind of the question I've asked everybody. I asked Andrea, I asked Lee, I asked Bob, I asked everybody about how often are confessions proven to be false and the person gets a not guilty verdict after confessing. And it's absolutely happened. I know cases where it's happened, but it's very unusual. She wouldn't allow third party because there was no DNA connection. RA had no DNA connection. There was a nexus for third party defense, no justice today. I think there was definitely enough for third party. Myself, personally, if I was the judge, I would have allowed it. But we're going to see what the appellate court says. That's what we have appellate courts for. I hate to leave things to the appellate court and to be like, oh, it's fair because, we'll let the Court of Appeals sort it out. I hate when state court judges say that because it's a boondoggle for criminal defendants. You're sitting in prison, you're convicted, everybody thinks you did it, even if you win. Now you're a murderer out on the street. It's really tough. It's really tough. Peter, what bothers me is that we haven't seen any not guilty verdicts on this channel. The bar for guilty verdicts is just way too low with juries. So I wouldn't disagree with you about the bar being too low. I don't think people fully understand or hold the state to their burden in certain cases. we have seen some not guilty verdicts. Scott Peterson in the Parkland shooting case where he was the resource officer at the school, that was a not guilty verdict. Kyle Rittenhouse, we watched the verdict on this channel. That was not guilty. Karen Reed was a hung jury. Alec Baldwin, the case was dismissed. It wasn't a not guilty verdict from a jury. Trying to think if there were any other ones. I do think there have been some not guilty verdicts. Never use, always or never. Yes, Rebecca. Put it plainly. This makes me nervous for the Kohberger case. I'll just tell you, this is why Kohberger's lawyers are talking about what an uphill battle it is. And they do those juror surveys because everyday people sitting on their couch, they just think people did it if they've been arrested. I don't know if Brian Kohberger did it or not. I don't feel like I know most of the evidence in that case. I don't sit in either camp. He's presumed innocent. That's where I'll be. He's presumed innocent like everybody else, like including Puff Daddy. Sean P. Diddy Combs is presumed innocent right now, regardless of what we think we know, right? What's going to come out as reliable and credible evidence at trial still remains to be seen. But yeah, when you look at a Brian Kohberger case and you hear about the evidence in this case, you start to see like, yeah, I mean, the chances of a not guilty verdict are not 50-50, right? It's not 50-50. We do not walk into a case 50-50. Yeah, Nicole said Depp. I was going to mention that it's technically a civil case, but a lot of people thought he was the wrongdoer and the jury found otherwise. Andrea said she'd help Richard Allen with his appeal. That's great. I think that's great. He deserves the best lawyers to make sure that this was the right verdict. And I hate to think if he's innocent. I hate it. I hate thinking about it, right? I've had clients that I believe did not commit a crime and have taken plea deals even. Forget about just get convicted, taking a plea deal. And I've been like, oof, but I can't tell them not to, right? Because we go to trial. I'll give them, my opinion, but we go to trial and they lose. They're looking at 10x the sentence. I've had other cases where it's like affirmative defenses, entrapment or self-defense, where they actually commit the deed, right? And they've gotten convicted. And the jury just did not believe the affirmative defense. And that's hard as well. Do you think Innocence Project will pick this up? I don't know. I mean, it's got a high profile. It's possible. He's got lawyers. Maybe they'll work with him. I assume that Baldwin and Rosie will stay on the case. I don't know that to be true. Off topic. Why is there snow on the LYK icon? I guess John updated it to our, Christmas holiday icon. It's winter here in Florida today. We are looking at a brisk 83 degrees, the high being 85 today. So I'm wearing my short sleeves and still sweating outside. All right, let me see. I had a couple other notes. Oh, so people were asking about what felony murder is in this case. The felony he was charged with was kidnapping. And if a killing occurs in the course of a felony, even if you don't intend to kill, you could still be charged with felony murder. None of that really matters now. I thought we were going to have to wait till 3 for the verdict. Let me see what else I have here. Yeah, I said, if not guilty, no justice for Abby and Libby. Richard Allen gets to go home, but his life is severely damaged forever. We were talking reputation, mental health, public perception. Just getting accused of something like this ruins your life. Disagree, Peter. The judge wouldn't let the defense impeach. She wouldn't let the full timeline in. I'm sure the defense lost certain things. What I'm saying is I've heard, and again, it's always hard, Majestic. And I don't know if you were there, and if you were, I'll defer to you. It's always so hard when I can't watch the trial myself, right? But I would have expected people to be screaming at the rooftops if she was being as unfair as the judge in YSL was. People were screaming about that for Judge Cannoni and Karen Reed's case. And while I think she definitely leaned the prosecution, I did not think it rose to the level of some appealable issue, but people were screaming from the rooftops, pounding the table about that. I would have expected that, or maybe even worse in this case. Why do you think it took the jury so long? Someone must have leaned not guilty. I guess maybe somebody was like, I don't think those confessions were legit. I think they were coerced. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Circumstantial evidence adds up He's guilty. That's what Lele said. Not P. Diddy Peter. Yes, he's presumed innocent. And I actually like test cases like P. Diddy, right? I like that for us to challenge ourselves. Do we really believe the rules and laws and protections that we have in our country? Because if we can't sit there and say he's innocent until you prove it to me in court, if we can't say that about P. Diddy, now we expect them to be able to prove it, right? It sounds like they've got a lot of evidence. It's, the feds, usually a little bit stronger of a case. So while I believe they will get enough and be able to, prove this and go forward, he is presumed innocent. And that's how we have to see it until they force us onto the guilty side. They better get rid of every reasonable doubt we have and push us over to that guilty side to where we are resolute and nobody can convince us otherwise that he is guilty. That's how it should be. That's how the justice system should be in America, the criminal justice system. I wish that they had stats on jurors who do research and if they have the same verdict after the research regarding all the cases, not just this one. Yeah, I think that percentage would be very small for jurors that changed their position after doing a bunch of research before the case. It's just my guess. Yeah, I'm not saying you got to go to a P. Diddy party. Okay, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying this is how we learn about the justice system, right? We learn with some of the most difficult cases. And a lot of law school cases are just like that. Like this person is convicted of ending this child's life and he confessed to it, but he confessed to it after getting beat over and over and over again in a interrogation room by a cop. But he confessed and we think he did it. Should that confession come in? Absolutely not. I'm not talking about this case. I'm talking about like cases in law school books. We have to make those tough decisions. That confession should not come in, even though he's the worst of the worst kind, because we cannot allow that in our country. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it has to be the case. I hope RA receives lots of support in mail. Andrea's specialty is appeals. Yes. How can we donate? I'm sure she will have ways to donate if she wants to do that. I'm not sure. I haven't talked to her about that. If there's a way I can help, more than happy to. Again, not because I'm positive he's innocent, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm positive he's innocent. I haven't sat in the courtroom. I didn't hear the whole trial, but I want everybody to get the best defense they possibly can. To have lawyers look under every stone. That's what I try to do for my clients, right? I just try to do the best I can. I can't be a miracle worker, right? Can't go back in time and change a fact. But I do the best I can as a lawyer, investigating, researching, fighting, arguing, and making sure you get the just result you deserve. Libby solved her and Abby's own murder, in my opinion. Dip, dive, duck. I 100% don't trust these law enforcement. Jesse Snyder, Carroll County, 2007. Please look this up. The same people railroaded this veteran. All right. I think that's all we got. This has been a wild ride. It doesn't feel like it's over. We'll see. And you guys let me know like what else comes up. Send it to me. Tag me in it on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Shoot it to our email, lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And we'll keep following it because I'm still interested in what's going to be happening with this. I encourage you to follow Lawyer Lee, Andrea, Bob from Defense Diaries, and Allie. They're boots on the ground. They've been there trying to shine a light, transparency on this case. And get in their chat, be respectful, be kind and nice and gracious. Even if you think he absolutely did it and you think justice is served, a guilty verdict, let them know why. And then listen to, what they have to say. And you guys can learn from each other, just like I learn a lot from you guys. So I appreciate it. Please hit that like button if you guys have not already. And if anybody's new and just subscribing to our page from this case, let me know in the comment section. I love to see when new people come and subscribe based on a new case. And it helps out the channel when you subscribe and when you like the videos. All right. That's all we got. Till next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.